Good evening. My name is Keith Dreyer. I am privileged to be the president of the Shills Fund. The Shills Fund is actually named after Dr. Edward B. Shills, the late Dr. Shills. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to innovative approaches and entrepreneurial leadership to advance oral health. Through a series of educational webinars, through our great oral health Shark Tank type shows where we mentor startups, we are innovating and providing access to capital in this changing world. This is a really great program, and it's an honor that we have our main speaker, Abe Kasbo. Abe is the founder and CEO of Verisoni, a marketing communications advisory consultancy and agency. The firm delivers integrated marketing communication strategies across channels to Fortune 500, middle market, and startup clients in the US and globally. Abe serves as an advisor to C-suite executives on communications, branding, and public relations strategies. He is the immediate past chair and member of the board of advisors and of the Center for Entrepreneurial and Innovation Studies at Seton Hall University. He is the recipient of the 2023 Shills Entrepreneurial Fund Excellence in Industry Award. Abe has been featured in the New York Times, Forbes, Institutional Investor, Fox Business, PBS, Bankrate.com, American Marketing Association, The National, The Record, Star Ledger, Fox, WOR, CBS, Becker's Healthcare, ROI New Jersey, as well as international media outlets around the world. And he's also an awesome basketball coach extraordinaire. He truly is. And with us also, after Abe's presentation, we will hear Dr. Carson Carpenter will join Abe. Dr. Carpenter serves as president of Compliance Training Partners. He is an OSHA authorized trainer with over 25 years, designed educational programs to bring dental facilities into compliance with the government regulations that affect them in the areas of OSHA, HIPAA, and infection control. His experience includes guiding numerous clients across the U.S. through OSHA and HIPAA inspections, as well as critical post-inspection process. So Carson is basically a dentist, an entrepreneur, and really a well sought out key opinion leader. So without further ado, I invite Abe to please take it away.
Well, thank you, Keith. That's a wonderful introduction, and thank you and the Shills Fund for the opportunity to be with you here tonight. You guys do some great work, and again, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And Carson, thank you for joining us.
Glad to.
So we'll dive right in, and look, marketing communications or communications is a fairly large topic, especially I think for startups. It could be fairly confusing because of what's going on just on, in the world of marketing communications. But ultimately, if we're talking about communications, we're talking about marketing your business, right? Because that's how you tell your story. You drive awareness, right? You're building a meaningful brand story. Those are the kinds of things that you have to do in order to get your startup or any business going. Within large companies, there are entrepreneurs, and within those, you've got to sort of behave the same way. So if you are in business, you are communicating. If you're communicating, then you're marketing, right? And I think ultimately, people buy the story first, and then the product, right? You've got to engage with them. You've got to tell them about the business, about the service, about the idea. So everything that you do becomes about marketing your brand. And if you're a startup, you're working with, 2 to 3 people. Even if you're working within a team of 20, right? You are selling your own brand and the business. So you've got to be cognizant of that duality. And with every piece of communications, you're seeding the market. So if you're having a conversation with somebody at lunch, you're communicating. If you're having, if you're doing a webinar like this, we're communicating. The the your brand and that communication can either enhance how people look at the business or hurt it. There's really, there's really no two ways about it because if these folks walk away with a neutral attitude, that's actually even more difficult and more problematic, right? Because you could fix a problem that may be perceived, or if people like it, that's great. But ultimately, all of this is a contributor to your brand equity. And study after study shows that companies who have favorable brand equity tend to do better. And if there is an exit, they certainly tend to do better there, right? So, like, what is marketing, right? Because what I hear is, people say, well, we want to do, we want to do a TV commercial, or we want to be on the web, those are tactics, right? Marketing communications is actually convincing people. It's persuasion. It's the art of convincing people to buy your stuff, right? Why do they do that? Right? It's you want them to think a certain way about you. You want them to feel a certain way about you. It's also about finding customers. You found customers, now you got to convince them to do X, Y, and Z. And you do that, frankly, by teaching, right? Think of marketing as almost like you're teaching somebody. You got to pull them in. It's got to be creative. And we all remember, back, in college or in grade school, our favorite teacher. And it's likely because there's a personality there. There's a connection. And that's what this is all about, right? Marketing is basically a persuasive tool, however you do it, to help people buy your stuff. And in a startup, we really have two distinct audiences. We've got your customers who, again, don't want to buy your stuff, but you have to raise money. You need investors. Your investors are your customers. And depending on the life cycle of your business, right? Like I I don't know where everybody's, where they come in. You could be at the idea stage, you could be at the exit stage. But it's really, really important that you focus on the life cycle of your startup, right? If it's in the idea stage, if it's actually in any stage, you want to sell that vision all the time to investors because that's that's what could be keeping you in business, right? A lot of startups don't make any money. They may not even make any money at the maturity stage. If you recall, Amazon, I don't believe Amazon posted their first profit until years and years after they went public, right? So, but Jeff Bezos had to continue to sell his vision to investors, to Wall Street, to private equity firms who own, stock in the business and what have you. So you're selling your vision at the idea stage, you're selling your vision at the exit stage, but from when you put down marketing plans, when you lay down those strategies have to meet you've got to meet the life cycle of the business. You really can't run too far ahead because, I'm assuming that nobody here is Coca-Cola. We don't have endless budgets, endless resources. So you've got to really focus on the task at hand, right? All right. So, so how do we tell a compelling story? One, you've got to make sure that the story is emotional, that it's meaningful. And there are two different stories. The meaning for investors is going to be a little bit different. That look and feel of that deck could be a little bit different than what you're pitching to your customers, right? So you might have a sell sheet for your customers. You might have, a front-facing website, but the conversations that you're having with your investors are a little bit different. right? For investors, we're emphasizing your vision, the market potential, the growth strategies, and if there are pro formas, um, sales numbers, projections, all of that goes in there, right? For customers, it's it's a different approach, obviously, right? What does the product do for me? How does it help me? And we have to do that in the most creative and the simplest way possible. So it all starts with your brand. And this is a much larger conversation, but I thought that we would go through these bullet points here one by one and just kind of, talk them through. Ultimately, if you're a startup, and again, it could be one person, three people, whatever it is, you're relying on your personal reputation to get the attention of both investors, right, and your customers. So people have to trust you, and you've got to make sure that that reputation is intact. Um, the the reputation of the business is going to allow others to refer you. It's going to make easier for you to be easier for you to sell your stuff, right? It's going to make it easier for people to refer, right? I don't know if the referrals will buy. So, I mean, certainly we have that issue because people do refer because you just might be meeting somebody at the wrong time, right? But we can't control for that. So you've got to just do your best to make sure that you have the best possible reputation for the business. And that can mean from, anything from when you have a meeting, you look somebody in the eye to how good your website looks. There's a lot of things going on within that third bullet. I also want to share with you that branding, the brand, is not necessarily an exercise. Branding is a result of what you do over time. If you think about some of the most glorious brands that we all know and love, I don't know, take Starbucks, for example. It took probably about 30 years for Starbucks to become a real brand, right? If you just think about their sort of modest days in Seattle. Same thing for, say, Jersey Mike's, right? There's a small little shop down the shore in New Jersey, and now, there's 4,000 stores or something like that. Think about Coca-Cola. It wasn't a big hit in the beginning. It took years and years. So when we think about branding, because we are the recipient of branding, because we have access to marketing, we just think it's something that you do. But it's actually a result of what you do over time so people can feel about you. Like if I said American Express, it's likely that your stomach and your heart are working, not necessarily your brain, because you're probably responding with a feeling. And that's what you want, right? That's what good branding is it elicits a feeling because people usually, shop with their brain, but they buy with their hearts. And so we have to think about branding as a long-term project and not necessarily a quote unquote a branding program where we're going to put up a website and it's a brand, or we're going to do our logo and it's a brand. That's just not the way it is. But I understand why people think that way. Um, there's no quick hitters, and again, I mean that. The whole branding exercise, it takes time because uh, ultimately it's how people feel about you. Well, they have to experience you, right? They have to experience your product. They have to experience your service. They have to experience your ideas. Um, that's not a one-time thing. We can't just go out, oh, let's go to a trade show and boom, 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 and now we have a brand. That's not how it works. And if you commit to a long-term vision, it starts from the beginning. It starts with the startup mentality, and it keeps going because what you don't want to do in this third from the bottom here is you don't want to drop marketing bombs. Oh, we need this, or we need a brochure, we need a sell sheet, or we got to redo the logo. Marketing bombs ultimately costs more than they should, and I don't just mean dollars and time. I mean opportunity. Um, and look, I don't have any real data on that, but I do have, you know, 25 years of experience that tells me no marketing bombs. It's a waste of time. And of course, now with digital, people think, there's all kinds of automated quote unquote marketing programs. There's really no such thing. You've got to continuously manage it, and you've got to pay attention to it, and you've got to nurture it. It's a baby, and it's always going to be a baby because the time, even when it grows up, you still have to care for it, right? It's not like a child that turned 25 and they get a high paying job somewhere and they go. You're still worried about them, right? This thing is actually even more intense. You really have to pay attention to it, um, or something may happen to. So, and then also too recognize that not just with branding, but with marketing, right? That not everything you're going to do is going to work. It's an impossible task, right? Because if everything that I did worked, I think we were talking before about, going to Paris. Frankly, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sitting somewhere sipping, at a cafe, sipping coffee at a cafe in Paris, right? But but the important thing is to manage through it, is to recognize what's going on early or as early as possible, mitigate it, and rinse and repeat. So how do we get to a good brand, right? And and you guys are welcome to use some of this stuff if you want, but we think about it in sort of six different ways. And frankly, some of these may be different for different companies, but and even different sectors. But for the most part, this works for many of our clients. So we want to make sure that we're making an emotional connection when we speak. We can't do it all the time. Sometimes we're working on the B2B side, sometimes on the B2C side, sometimes on the B to C side. And there's a lot going on, but we strive to make an emotional connection. And again, that goes back to the sort of the positioning, right? We're trying to be persuasive. Well, we could be persuasive by saying 1 + 1 is 2, or we can be persuasive by saying, hey, let me take the math problem off your hands. Let me make it easier for you. So we want to make that emotional connection, right? Is the experience with the brand pleasant? All right, fine. You made the sale. What happens after the sale, right? You made the sale. Was the salesperson and uh, having a bad day? Did the website crash when somebody was, had their stuff in the cart? I don't know. We have to make sure that that is consistent. Are we fostering relationships in any of this stuff? It's all about relationships, as you guys know better than I do. And I'll leave that because that is a whole section that we could stay on here for hours. Are we encouraging people to tell and share our story? Well, social proof today is a big deal, meaning that like, are people talking about your brand? Are people recommending you? Do you have 5 stars on Google, 3 stars on Google? What's going on? Right? That is a big deal. So, what are we doing? Because that's an active thing. You've got to do that, right? And are we making a positive impact with our message, right? We're not Debbie Downers or, whatever, but are we making an impact with our message, and a positive one at that? And people like to be around leaders. How are we showing leadership in this space? So for us, we like to sort of take this, these brand rules or, map and say, let's apply that as much as possible to every situation. And we adapt it, obviously, depending on time, place, client, and opportunity. Okay. So when we're writing copy, right, what we want to make sure we use specific language and behaviors that we want our customers, partners, investors to how we want them to feel about us. right? So that's how we're thinking about how we write copy. How do we want people to feel about us? Feel, not think, but feel. So how do we do that? One, I'm going to draw your attention to this thing down here. First of all, it takes time. It's got to be done in drafts. I mean, it can be done. I should have probably written it must be done in drafts because you don't get it right the first time. You have to think about it, right? This is the kind of thing where you only want to do once. But if you put your brain in the center, what kind of voice, what kind of attributes do we have here? And this is basically, you want it to be cool, you want it to be pioneering, confident, partnership, leadership. Well, then from that is how you generate your taglines. That is how you generate copy. That is how you generate, you know, the visuals, right, around a particular brand or campaign, right? And so what could we learn from the established brands? If we go back here a little bit, let me just go back, right? So we all know, we all know what Coca-Cola is about, and there's a feeling about that. We all know what the iPhone is about. There's a feeling about that. We all know what Mercedes is about. There's a feeling about that. Ozempic, we've gotten to learn a lot about that, right? But none of these products are actually saying, buy me as a product. These guys are now selling, and of course, they've been in the marketplace for a long time, right? But there's a lot to learn from them. So we don't spend the kind of, research dollars because they've already done it and the experience is already there. So let's learn from them. But they're selling lifestyle, they're selling a feeling, they're selling possibilities, right? And I would say that if you're on the B2B side, stay away from like, corporate teas or, business, unless, sort of business terms, unless the culture of the business sector that you're selling into calls for it. Sometimes you can't get away from it. So you got to use that stuff and humanize the product as much as possible. If you think about like Ozempic, right? It seems like a wonderful product to help people lose weight. But even at that, they are talking to the two different audiences at the same time. They're talking to the patient. They're also talking to the doctor. And at the same time, they're also talking to insurance companies, by the way, right? Who are all, right, subjected to the same message because if they see that commercial, it doesn't matter where you fit in that whatever what category you fit in, you're a human being and you're still being subjected to it. And that's you know um that's the art of the sort of the business, right? And then another consideration is the brand sub-brand spectrum. So you might you might be a startup that has two or three different products. You might be a startup within a larger company, right? Google has a lot of startups. I mean, we can go on. There's startups everywhere. And certainly if you're a standalone startup, and you've got technology, but within that technology, there are certain brands. Well, there's considerations. Do you want a branded house? And that's like Federal Express, for example, right? Where Federal Express is the major brand, and then underneath that are basically the services. Federal Express Ground, Freight, Express, right? The sub brands are all under Virgin, right? So it'd be Virgin Records, Virgin Airlines, that sort of thing. And then the endorsed brands are one that you've got a major brand, but for a startup, I'm not sure about this. In fact, I wouldn't recommend this because you have not been in the marketplace enough. So if this was Google and there's a startup, I could see it. But if you're a standalone startup, I would put a big X over this, but you should know it. And the same thing for House of Brands here, right? So I would say that we kind of fit in here somewhere, if this is the case, of course. But House of Brands, again, you're going to need a powerhouse to power your smaller brands. And that's just not the case where we are right now. So the formula for success in any of this is frequency, which means consistency, reach, and creative, right? So it's how many times you need to be in the marketplace, and it doesn't matter, because if you're talking to an investor, it's how many meetings, right? If we're pushing out into the market with, let's say, a TV commercial, where and how many times are people going to see it, who's going to see it demographically, that sort of thing. But that consistency piece, right? The reach, who are we talking to? What are their demographics, and how relevant are they, right? And then, of course, creative. And creative, is interesting because we tend to internalize creative. I mean, like, who doesn't think they're creative? We all like to, at one point or another, think that we're all very creative. But and it's very hard to sort of let go of that. But if you're dealing with professionals, I would suggest to let go of it and have them explain the reason for that positioning. Because sometimes with startups, and I love our founders, but you do get founder syndrome. And founder syndrome is not necessarily a good thing, because the entire thing is about internalizing everything. I would say, if you can, let this one go. Let the creative people do their thing, and yeah, just let it go. I can go on, especially on founder syndrome, for a long time. All right. So do we want to sell benefits, or do we want to sell features? Right. So you can see here that I'm not a fan of features. They're important. You've got to sell. If you're selling a piece of software, you got to know who the person on the other side is, who you're sitting in front of, and what you're selling. And if they respond to to a particular coding style or piece of software, of course you got to say that. But at the end of the day, we're talking about problem solving, right? We're talking about making sure that you're making an emotional connection. We're making sure that the benefits actually show what you could do for me as the customer, right? Or what you could do for me as the investor. Right? So if you just replace customer and investor, they're pretty much the same thing. We're just talking about different aspects of the business to each, right? Let's talk about messaging a little bit, and let's examine two cases. And I'm hoping that these two cases, some of us are, most of us are familiar with. If you look at McDonald's, and if you look at the "I'm loving it" campaign, well, McDonald's literally telling you what to think of them, right? So if they run the frequency of that message enough, people will literally drive by McDonald's going, "I'm loving it." And that's actually the intent of the campaign, right? So again, kind of going back to what we said earlier in the show, where we want to, in our language and everything that we do, we want to make sure that we seed the message that we want in people's minds, and they will repeat it back. That's just human nature, folks. It's not, it's not me. Marketing is behavioral. So it's about human behavior more than anything, right? So again, changing people's minds, that sort of thing, those are all behavioral. Or getting people, getting somebody to buy your stuff. It's behavioral. It's not, oh, we're going to post on Facebook. That's just not it, right? Um, let's examine what can Brown do for you. Well, what can Brown do for you ran, I want to say, for like 11 years or something, right? So people heard it over and over again. You would think that what could Brown do for you is, it's aimed at the consumer, but it's actually aimed at investors, and it's aimed at the large buyer. But hey, they bought a lot of TV commercials. Well, why did they do that? Right? They did that because they know that the B2B buyer is also human. They watch TV, right? And they're literally saying, what can Brown do for you to elicit? Oh, right. It's a question. It gets me involved and within a larger story, right? But but again, they're not that tagline is very simple, but it also pulls you in, right? Yeah, excuse me, I'm loving it is the word love is emotional, right? The what could I do for you? It's basically sort of like asking your permission or like what could I do? What how do we work together? And it works on another level, right? On a subconscious level. Those are the kinds of things that I'd like our startups, and when I'm advising startups, to think about in their in how they develop the copy for their brand and then ultimately position themselves. Well, that's great. We have a fantastic brand. This is just the model because it could be more expensive. I mean, more expensive. We'll talk about expensive later. It could be more extensive than this, or it could just be two of these. I don't know. It just depends on what the business needs at the time, right? So when we're doing a brand distribution model, we put the brand in the center and say, okay, now we got to go out and we need influencers. And okay, we're going to attend 3 events and we're going to send out 1 email a month. And then we're going to do an ad in here. And then we've got social media and digital going, and we have to develop an app for the website because of X, Y, and Z, right? So that's kind of the model for all of this. And again, it could be three of these, right? And it could be three of these for a variety of reasons. One, it could be a dollar and cents issue, right? We may not have the budget. So this is what we could do to make sure that we maximize our efforts. Or it could be a human resource issue. It could be a partner issue. It could be anything, right? So you do what you can with the dollars that you have for what is immediately in front of you. Okay, so on the digital side, I kept this pretty boring because this particular slide, because again, I think I can go on here. The digital approach, people want to run to social media right away, but social media is actually a little bit trappy here. It's a big trap. One, organically, it's actually a poor performer, and you'd never know that listening to all the sort of social media gurus out there. But if you look at the data is overwhelmingly um, uh, basically saying, "Hey, look, we need to be a bit more sober about this approach." Okay, but let's put that aside. Anything digital is a tool. It's not going to solve your problems. So if you're doing web sales, make sure that your e-commerce experience is terrific. But that is only a tool, right? Everything else, like the programming part of it, we can buy that. But the experience part of it has to be a much larger, has to play a much larger role, right? Um, so we have that, but you have to know who your audience is on digital. So once you do that, then we can kind of say, all right, do we need videos? Do we need whatever it is that we need? Because every customer touch point, as we said earlier, counts. And as I said, like there is no hard ROI on the digital side, meaning on the social side, right? If you're running an e-commerce concern, um, there absolutely you're going to know very quickly whether there's an ROI. The other thing to consider here is that social proof happens very, very quickly with digital. And so making sure that you can distribute your case studies online, making sure that you get your reviews and your testimonials, that will get you well on your way. You also want to make sure that the entire experience is is as pleasant as possible for whoever's visiting, right? So the website actually looks nice. It is easy. You get people in, get it out if you need to, quickly get them the information they need or give them the experience they need. And and have them stay. It just depends on the goals of the business. So when we do that, when we decide that, then the leveraging of all of this experience has to be across the board. The whether it's blogs or social posts or whatever, they have to, especially as a startup, make sure that you're seeding the market with information they need so you can actually nurture it, right? So the angle that you take has to be sort of from an educational perspective, right? Or an engagement perspective. Is there a community that you could join, or is there a community that you could start? How do we get salespeople talking about it? If that is a route, it could be distribution, right? We have to think about all of that. And then, of course, if you personally take a leadership role on social, then you could leverage that into PR opportunities. And don't forget, again, I love our social media gurus, but and this isn't the sexiest thing in the world, but email gives you a 6-time return versus social any day, and the numbers are there to prove it. So think about how you want to leverage email. I wanted to bring these in here to show you a little bit how, and these are for B2B startups, but ultimately what's happening, because we all know what's happening on the B2C side in terms of how people buy, right? We all go to Amazon, we all go to Walmart.com, we're at Temu now or whatever. But ultimately, for a long time, the B2B space, for some reason, was thinking that it really wasn't like the B2C space. And that's ultimately, not necessarily true because you're dealing with humans, right? And so now that we're all dealing with Amazon, right? We're buying stuff on Amazon. Well, look at what happened here. This is from McKinsey, and we're going to see 3 or 4 slides like this, right? But basically, 2 out of 3 buyers want want a remote interaction or digital self-service to buy stuff. Right? Two out of 2 out of 3. It's amazing. So the number of distinct channels that B2B customers use during their decision, yeah, this is 2021. It's probably more now, right? Um, that's outstanding. I mean, and I mean outstanding. I mean, like it's mind blowing, right? Because now, as a startup, you want to think about, what do I do with this information? If I'm talking to the B2B space, right? If I'm in the B2B space, what do I do with this information? How do I position myself? What do I say? What platforms do I use? This is the kind of market intelligence, right, that we ought to use to inform how we build our marketing plans. Here's another one, right? For the first time, B2B sellers are more likely to offer e-commerce channels than in-person selling. That is insane, right? You would think it's insane, but it's not. It's happening. Again, how, right? I have this information here. What do I do with it? What do I do with it if I am selling into that space? Well, clearly, what I would do, let me actually just finish this. And this is another reason, or I'm sorry, another touch point that shows you that people are actually preferring e-commerce over, even over in person. And finally, people are buying. B2B customers are buying. They're spending up to $500,000. 35% of those folks are actually comfortable spending up to that, with a single click online. So my point is that what do we do with all of this? We take that information, we put it into the hopper and say, okay, this is what we need to do on digital. Here's, from it could be webinars. If people are spending that kind of money, then maybe what we should do is move up our products onto the homepage. But whatever it is, the data is out there to help you make a more informed decision on how to engage your customers. But ultimately, this is what a sample 12-month integrated marketing plan looks like, right? And again, this is just a sample. Yours could be much larger. It could be half of this. What we started with brand realignment. Let's reset the story, right? We need to build a new investor deck. The website needs work. This is when we're launching it. You really should do something like this for your brand, for your marketing. One, it'll keep you accountable. You'll be able to keep track of this, and of course, you want to attach budget and responsibilities to this. But ultimately, um, marketing is behavioral. Marketing is about changing people's hearts and minds, or reinforcing stuff, right, that they know about you, and then executing against it, because all of this is very nice, right? But Keith said that during the introduction that I coach basketball, and it's true. You could develop all the plans in the world, but if I draw up a play, and if my team doesn't execute the play, then it's not going to work. So we are now at the end of the presentation. I want to thank you for your time, for listening to me, and I'm happy to take any questions now.
Well, Abe, we do have some questions here. If you're ready, we could start with that.
Yeah, I'm definitely ready.
Okay. First of all, someone asked a question. They said they're really enjoying it. They're learning a lot. Is this recorded? If this webinar is recorded, if so, how will they be able to get it?
Everybody who registered will receive the email, with the link, and it will be on the show's website, and we'll post it on LinkedIn.
Perfect. Perfect. I have another question here, Abe, and this is one someone said, I'm new to this, a little confused. Can you tell me what's your definition of the difference between sales and marketing?
Well, that's a great question. So in terms of sales, it's literally like, hey, let's get in front of somebody and let's talk about our service, product, or idea. Okay. Marketing actually happens a little bit before sales, right? You develop the script, right? You develop the materials that salesperson needs. You develop the website that salesperson can point to, or you develop the social media profile that salesperson can point to. So marketing and sales actually work hand in hand, but marketing greases the wheels and helps sales execute.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that answer. And here's somebody with a real specific question. They said, I'm involved in a marketing, sales and marketing plan. I've already invested an enormous amount of money in social media. Very interesting that you say that social media really isn't the answer. I'm starting to wonder if I should target my dollars, reallocate my dollars. Any response to that? It sounds like they're saying 75, 80% of their dollars in social media, and they're
Yeah.
not getting, they didn't say what responses they're getting, but they're not getting the results they expected.
Well, I can give you some hard numbers, and of course that is thank you for the question, but I would certainly need more information to be able to give you proper advice and respond properly. I could tell you that two things. One is Facebook organically for any business page. It could be Coca-Cola's, or it could be ours, or even the Shills Fund, right? Facebook will not show organic posts, meaning organic posts are like, hey, we're having a sale today. We're just typing that, right? And so uh, they suppress that because they want you to pay for it, which is fine. That's their business. But the average engagement rate on a Facebook post, according to Rivals.com, Rivals is a social platform research outfit, and they do a great job. Is 0.03. Actually, I think it's less. I think it's 0.02 this year. It was 0.03 last year. 0.02. To put that in perspective, that's engagement. That means that somebody did something with your post. That doesn't mean they bought, right? That means that they might have hit like, or they might have shared it, or maybe scrolled over it. But 0.02, what that means is let's assume that you had 1,000 people in on your Facebook page, and all 1,000 of them were actually your customers or relevant, right? They may not be your, but they're, let's just call them your relevant market. Well, 0.02 is less than a half a person, right? That is, to me, if we all say we manage by data and we want to be fiscally responsible, that is an irresponsible way, in my opinion, and the reason why I'm saying irresponsible is because I actually have a book coming out in a couple of months called Irresponsibly Digital. So I don't mean to insult anybody. It's just embedded in my head. It's we really have to look at that, right? And then on the advertising side, we have to make sure that the dollars allocated to, Facebook, LinkedIn are actually going where they're supposed to go, because and it's a much larger conversation, but it's usually a black box. They do a much better job on the ad side, but there is a good bit of a black box associated with social media advertising.
Abe, this next question might be the perfect follow-up to that. And what this person is asking, well, if that's the case, what marketing metrics should I be looking at to know if I'm allocating dollars properly?
Right. So we have two things really matter. Remember, more than half of website traffic is fake in the United States. And oh, by the way, I know the talking point is that it's coming from China and Russia. It's actually generated from good old United States, and that's not me talking. That's Barracuda Networks talking. Those are much bigger internet outfits talking about this. So having said that, what we care about are form fills, phone calls that are generated through the website, because we can mask it with a web phone number, right? And emails. At the end of the day, that's what we look at. Website traffic is important, but it is not the most important thing.
Here's another really good question too. They said Abe, you had mentioned the value of emails, but what do you think about purchasing lists of emails to grow the business, to grow awareness?
That's a great question, and we've been buying lists for a long time. If you're buying it from a list broker, I would expect a very high attrition rate for that list, an extremely high attrition rate. Or people, I use fake emails all the time. I'm a sample of one. I totally get it, but people will use fake emails. They'll just to get access to white papers or position papers or sites or whatever. So it could be a terribly expensive exercise for very little return. And also too, because we don't have a relationship with these folks, it's problematic. You don't have a relationship with somebody, you get, just think about, getting an email from somebody you don't know, especially a business. You're most likely hitting spam or delete, right? However, emails that come through trusted partners are vastly different. Emails that come through, for example, things like this, like webinars, are vastly different. So if you're doing a webinar with a much larger entity, right? So somebody sponsors you, and your startup is now featured in front of, I don't know, 6,000 people attending a webinar. Well, if you get that list, you've already have a relationship with those folks. Reaching out to those folks is going to be a little bit easier than if you were to purchase those names, right?
Mm-hmm. And I have to say, from a personal viewpoint, I've worked, my company's worked, especially when we were growing the company, we worked with Verisoni for years. And I remember you teaching us about the value of not contaminating our email list. I remember our creative team wanted to purchase lists. And your team told us we could destroy the good list we have if you buy the wrong list.
That's right. That's right. And that
It's
stands today,
tempting.
Kristen.
It's so tempting, right? We all get the emails. Every meeting I go to, buy, get 15,000 names for $400. It sounds good.
Yeah, and I think that digital has done a lot of good, right? It's democratized marketing, but it's actually made it harder. It's made it more difficult. It's made it actually more expensive, believe it or not, right? So we have to it's a fine balance between, trying to or thinking that it's easy because we can get emails but getting emails and then writing an appropriate email message are not the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Getting emails and making sure that it's on brand, it's not the same thing. Same thing with social media. So that kind of advice sometimes could be scary because it's not easy. Well, we're all in business. It's not easy, but it's the right thing to do.
And and I'll just answer this question. Somebody said, how they know it's too much to present tonight, but how can they get more information? Well, listen, I can just say I can easily say I would contact Verisoni and Abe at some point because you're right. We're spending a lot of money on these things, and often it's a waste. Speaking of money, I can move on to a different question now. This question is about, it says, Abe, what's your approach to fundraising? Specifically, it says, how do you use communications as a tool for fundraising?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's different, and we all see these things on TV and online. Somebody raised so much money, but ultimately it's about relationships, right? And making sure that that there's a gradual. And by the way, that relationship, the tool that I use in a relationship is a dinner or a lunch or a coffee, right? Because again, in the beginning, and whatever step or stage that we're on, if we're asking for money, we're basically asking for trust. My main communications tool is a meeting. I don't want to do it like this. I want to be in front of that person. I want them to I want to look at them in the eye. I want them to look me in the eye, and I want them to trust me, right? Look, you know, what's the stat? Like 9 out of 10 businesses, right, don't make it. And the folks who are in the venture world actually know this, right? And so to them, they already know that this money is expendable. And I'm an investor myself. And so I have these conversations with people that I'm trying to invest in. There's a certain pot of money that it's expendable to me. But I need to trust you. And so I always think about the tool isn't necessarily an email. The tool is an in-person meeting as much as possible.
See, that's interesting because probably people think of high technology marketing, but good old school still has a room. There's still a place for it, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. I don't think that you could trade that for anything. I know that, we've got AI coming and that whole thing, but right now AI isn't doing much sort of private investment. Like, I mean, they might be making recommendations on some, publicly traded companies, but with some kind of algorithm, but that's not what this is. Yeah.
I think at that point, other than asking for contact information, I think all the questions have been asked from what I can see here on my Q&A button.
Awesome.
And I know, Abe, you were prolific on LinkedIn, offering sharing your experiences and your knowledge, which, you're a good person to follow.
Yeah, please, connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation there. And certainly, Keith and Jamie and Carson, thank you so much for putting this together tonight. It's always good to be with you guys and see you. And certainly the Shills Fund, this platform is invaluable for startups and the education that you guys put together for entrepreneurs is second to none, in my humble opinion.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carson Carpenter. We appreciate you as well. And thank you, Abe, and thanks for attending. And we look forward to interacting and developing relationships with all. Thank you all.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Keith, and good night,
Good night.
everyone.
Good night.
Good night.